All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am thrilled to have back Lisa Danylchuk, no stranger to this podcast. Welcome back, Lisa.
Thank you, guys. So good to be here.
All right. So Lisa is an author, a licensed psychotherapist, and founder of the Center for Yoga and Trauma Recovery. A graduate of UCLA and Harvard University, her work has pioneered the field of trauma-informed yoga and transformed our understanding of embodiment practices and therapeutic work. More than 300 providers from 25 plus countries have completed Lisa's Yoga for Trauma online training program, the first virtual program to train providers offering yoga for trauma recovery. She serves on the board and as UN committee co-chair for the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation. She was elected to the role of secretary in 2018, was nominated for president-elect in 2020. Not too bad.
Yeah.
She's written for publications like Good Therapy and the American Psychological Association and was named one of top 20 inspirational yoga teachers for yoga teachers to follow in 2016. My God. Well, congratulations. Welcome back.
Thank you, guys. I want to read your bio now. I feel like it's like I'm there.
Not as stellar as that, certainly. So let me start. I posted something. I think it was on was it Instagram or something? I was outside with my family, yes, and it seemed to resonate with you.
Oh, yes, definitely.
So let's start there.
Yes. I think I got your message. It might have been an email or I saw it on Instagram, wherever. Who knows these days? Tracking things is challenging for all of us these days. But I saw it and you were outside, and I think my first reaction was just like, yes, the outdoors have been something that's so resourcing and healing for me across time, and especially now. And it's kind of nice that there are more people out on the trails now. I'm seeing a lot more people outdoors. But the two things that I loved about that photo was the sort of outside, we're doing all this work on the computer during the day. We're sort of isolated. Let's like go out where we can feel connected to the planet that we're riding through space on. And we can feel connected to each other, right? And you had that picture. It was just like a little selfie. I think it's so much easier to connect when we like put away those devices and just go out into an environment and enjoy it together. We don't even have to be processing, as you and I probably love to do, or talking. And that can happen really naturally on the trails too. You're just talking, maybe making jokes one moment, and then, reflecting on something the next. And I really feel like, I think this connects to EMDR in some ways, you're just doing that like movement, and I'm all about like yoga and mental health and movement, and stuff just sort of filters and simmers, and we can do that by ourselves. I love doing that by myself, but I also love doing that with people I love. And so that was the sort of inspiration, was just like, go get it.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to we all know the benefits of that, and it's so easy to think about doing those things. But at least for me, when you're out there, it's like, oh my God, what am I doing? Yeah. I'm just, like everyone else probably spends a lot of time inside working on computers, but man, I exhale and I'm able to like breathe. Yeah. For you as someone who is, I'm sure, dialed more into their bodies, and certainly I am, how has this crazy time, what's it been like for you?
I think at first, and I actually had a lot of clients that felt this way, a year or so ago when we started getting this, you have to shelter in place, there was a little bit of relief, because our culture runs hot, I like to say, in terms of, where our nervous systems are, in terms of our activity level. Americans are known around the world to be sort of workaholics and like always obsessively moving into the next thing and not resting. We don't take 3-hour meals generally, right? So for me, I was just like, okay, I can do that. Like, that feels like a healthy boundary, to just tell me to sit still. Like it's kind of like meditation. Hey, just sit down and be with yourself for a little while. And I actually had clients at that time who really felt in a similar way. They had been through this trauma. They had worked on things that were painful for them. They had worked through a lot of those things. They had developed pretty clear, there's always an evolution here, but pretty clear and concrete resources for themselves. I know when I need to get outside. I know when I need to be alone. I know when I need to just make jokes, right? Like knowing kind of what they need and when and how to tune into that, right? Whether it's through their body or just through that simple question of what do I need right now? And so they were kind of like, wow, everyone's freaking out and I'm good. This is nice. Like, this is good because now everyone else knows how I feel a lot of the time, right? They're concerned and worried and anxious or obsessively cleaning. And so depending on what different people are going through, I actually had a lot of people that I've worked with for many years just feeling like I can do this too. And then I think that lasted however it lasted for different people, weeks, months. But especially as we've hit this year mark, there's a real sense of the social deprivation, right? And I think in mental health, we've, some of us have been in circles where we've been talking about this for a long time, but I think there's more popular awareness now of like the social determinants of health. Were you held when you were a child? Did somebody respond to your needs? Were there adults around when you were a kid that you could rely on and go to? Did you have supports? Did you have resources, right? Internal, external, social resources. So after a year plus at this point of like deprivation of that resource, I've seen it's become really hard for me. Like I've tried to find ways, okay, can I FaceTime with my friend? I text people like, I know Christine Forner, you've had on this podcast a couple times too, or Susan Peace Bannett, you've had on here a couple times. I will text these people and say, send me something funny. Like just send me something funny right now. Or I'll text them and say like, oh, it's just really hard today, or whatever it is, or I'll call, but I usually don't get on a Zoom with them because I've like been on so many of those already through the day. And those are still some social resources that I have, but I'm working with people who live alone. Some of them have gotten pets, work with people who live with partners that have challenges. Challenges get more intense and in your face because there's nowhere to distract or avoid them. So I do think where there was this initial sense of potentially, not for everyone, but in my world, I saw an initial sense of respite in this, like, oh, I can sleep more. I don't have to, there's not all these demands on me. Then in some amount of time evolved into sort of recognizing it actually brings me energy to go outside and meet someone. It actually like, I actually need some of these social resources and almost like a vitamin. Once you're like so depleted in them, it gets loud, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, it's on a continuum. And when people will, as you're speaking and as people are hearing you, people are going to locate themselves along the different parts of that continuum there. And, for me, it's been hard to feel like I can't go out or I shouldn't go out. I don't have the vaccine yet, and I'm super conscious of wearing my mask. Not everyone is, and whatever, but I am. And it's been hard for me because when I talk to people or have friends, I like that idea of like just texting someone and saying, send me something that's funny. I mean, to me, that sounds like a certain amount of comfort. That you can text that person. They're just like a text away. And I think it's important to have that. And obviously not everybody has that.
Yeah. And there's so much biology behind getting to a place of connection or laughter. There's so much because, another thing I'll do in a pinch, I'll just tell people as a resource, I'll say, hey, Siri, tell me a joke.
That's a good one.
Hopefully she doesn't do it right now. But I'll do that if like, oh, I'm driving or whatever and I can't. Because what you're talking about, okay, I'm afraid to go outside. I'm afraid to hurt myself. I'm afraid to hurt my family or other people, anyone I love. There was a time, especially in the beginning, where we were like, can we give this to our dog? Can we give this to like, what? There's just this constant sense of threat, right? And we know from, all these conversations, many of your listeners have listened to many of your podcasts. They're familiar with things like the window of tolerance. They're familiar maybe with like the cascade model of like, when we talk about trauma, usually there's something that happens first that's like a threat to us, to our life, to our social connections, to our status or our emotional well-being, there's a threat. And right now, for over a year, there's been a very real physical threat, and we're seeing it take lives. And so from the moment you wake up, if you do walk out the door, right, even if you don't walk out the door, maybe you're washing your hands extra or whatever, but there's this constant like upped level for everyone of threat of harm to our own bodies. And we have really deep systems that'll protect against that, and of threat against harm of you know, losing or harming someone you love, which it's almost like, for me, I think I'd rather be gone than be having to suffer the loss of someone. I know many people listening have lost people this last year and in general in life, and it's hard. Like, it's really a hard road to navigate. So having that threat constantly there, not having the lightness of like water cooler talk or whatever we do at offices when we're in person, saying hi to the person in the line at coffee, by doing a random act of kindness for a stranger, holding the door, all of those, like, you know, Stephen Porges will call like ventral vagal sort of social connection actions, like all those little things gone. And so all of a sudden we're just in this state of like pretty much constant, like little moments where maybe you forget about COVID, but for the most time you're like in this state of threat, and not having all of that, you know, rest and digest time with friends, or sitting and having a meal, which is also really good for us at a deep level, right? Like those things are gone. And so we need like, and it's hard because it's almost scraps right now. Text me something funny, you know, like please help. Like, but it does help, and you can at least feel the connection around. I saw some quote that popped up on my phone the other day that was like, at least we can be alone. You know, it's the whole alone together thing. Like being isolated, you can be connected in your isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in those moments, that's kind of what we're doing, is like, I feel like crap. I feel like crap too. Oh, did you see this funny story or whatever, or meme? And it shifts your biology even, right? Just even a micro amount, enough for some of that tension that comes with the threat to shake off or to dissipate somewhat. So we're not so gripped in the face of fear.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hearing you talk about really the importance, obviously, of connecting with people. And like you said, some people don't have anyone to connect with.
Yeah.
Where do you think within all of this that we're talking about here, Lisa, what do you feel your passion is, your gift is, your kind of zone of genius? What do you want people to hear who are listening to this, that you have that comes from you?
It's so interesting. We could get into this, but it's not the format right now. But what comes to mind is actually something someone in one of my trainings said to me once, which is, and I think this is what I'm teaching, and she was sort of mirroring it back, but there's always a way through. Like, this is what helped her. And it wasn't, and I remember talking with her and being like, oh, well, there's many ways through. I wrote this book. It's all about all these different ways that can help you. And she's like, no, there's a way. There's a way, and I'm going to find it. And I think that right now, amidst all of this, is the thing that I would want to encourage people, the message that I would want to pass on. Like, there is a pathway through this. There are times where it's going to feel thorny. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be difficult. But if we trust that there is a path through, and we find the things we need to help us through, then eventually, and this is the hard thing, there's so much unknown. We don't really deal well with that in general. But eventually we'll make it through. So the things that I'm really passionate about sharing are finding those resources to make the moment a little more tolerable, to take that next step through, or to pause for a moment, and to really come back to our bodies. And you mentioned, well, some people are alone, right? And I have clients who live alone, and more than one of them have asked for, letters for a mental health support animal, right? If they weren't allowed to have them, it's like, okay, well, I need this. And recognizing, wow, I really did need that. And so connection with animals, connection with nature, like we started talking about. And I think there's an element here of connection with ourselves. And this might be a hard one, particularly if someone's alone, feeling isolated, has a really complex trauma history, like being alone with yourself. And this is one of the reasons meditation and mindfulness are so good, and they're very popular now. And that's great. But it's also, we've talked about this before, a huge ask for someone who's been through a lot and has a lot of emotions, experiences going on internally. I'm reading this book right now, I think it's called Aftershocks, and it's all about how the woman uses like earthquakes and fault lines as this description of her internal world, right? It's like, tell that person who feels like there's earthquakes to sit still and be with themselves. And I feel like this past year has like been a year of kind of forced meditation, minus the distractions, minus the resources, minus the social comforts and cues, with all this extra harm. And that can be a big ask. But what I have seen, and often, you know, with a therapist, but also times through a mindfulness or yoga journey that's supported, is that we find ways to connect with ourselves in a way that's resourceful, in a way that recenters us, in a way that brings a sense of even momentary peace or calm. And that's kind of like what we hope for, right? In a yoga journey. But there's a lot of structures and landmines and things along the way. So if someone is alone, I would say, you know, find something external first to go to. It might be a pet. I know the shelters have like cleared out long ago, but there's still dogs and cats and animals coming through. Find an animal, even if it's looking at online videos of animals, something you can connect with there. Find a tree or a plant or something that connects you to the earth. And if it's not too overwhelming, can you like place a hand on your heart? Can you feel a sense of love somewhere in your body, even if it's related to a positive memory, right? A kid you love to hold, or a bear that you had when you were little, or whatever. Can you find something that actually feels resourceful internally too? And these are big asks, but it's also pretty pressing times, right? Like we've got to find it where we can. And I don't think everyone's going to be able to like, oh, I'm place my hand on my heart and oh, I feel so much love. But some of us are, and some of us, sometimes we can, and sometimes it's not quite there, but we can practice that, right? And we can use our own bodies as a resource, right? And use those other resources.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing is hope. You know, there in just in that saying that you said, you know, there's a way. And that to me is very hopeful. And a lot of times when we're in it, whether it's, you know, we're experiencing trauma, we're experiencing severe anxiety, it's very easy to feel like there is no hope. But to just say, you know, the things you've said, to me, that sounds very hopeful, whatever it is. I mean, I'm still resonating with texting someone saying, tell me something funny. That is so simple.
Yes.
But it's just crazy. There are things we can do, you know, and people listening to this, something hopefully will click with them, you know, if they're feeling, because a lot of people don't want to go into their body, or don't even know what that means. What do you mean my body? No, you know,
I left there a long time ago for good reason.
Right.
Like, don't tell me to go back in there.
Yeah.
And I think there are ways to like, there's that continuum again, right? There's like, don't tell me to go back in there. And then there's like, oh, maybe. And then there's the people like me who are like, something's happening in my outer left pinky toe. Like, you know, like all in it all the time, maybe too much so. But, you know, I remember working with, here in Oakland with a group of sexual trauma survivors, and we wanted to start a yoga class, but we started literally with like painting nails, because it was like, oh, that feels like sort of a positive, dare we say, loving action towards ourselves, but it's super simple. It's sort of pop and stylish, right? We can just pick a color, pick a sparkle, look at it like, oh, okay, my fingernails, I just took care of them, right? And maybe that's the extent of going into your body, right? It doesn't have to be this full immersion.
Right. In Oak, are you near where I was living in Oakland, and I
Yeah.
just moved from I don't want to get too personal about where you're living, but okay, I was just thinking about Janina Fisher. She's in Oakland too.
Yeah.
Um, for me, this whole thing has one of the challenging things for me has been having moved. And when we moved from Oakland to Bend, Oregon, we didn't know anyone. And we thought, oh, we'd meet people through our kids' schools and stuff, but that did not happen.
Yeah.
And so, it's been a challenge for me because I don't have that social outlet that I'm right in tune with what you're talking about. I'm absorbing everything you're saying.
Yeah. And I think in those moments, like, I find so much value in just recognizing, like, this is a real thing. I think there's some sort of thoughts or rhetoric out there around, like, oh, you're lonely. Oh, well, that's not, like, kind of like with mental health. Like, you can't see it. It's not real. It's like, no, it's very real in terms of how we feel when we have community and support and people around us, and how we feel when some of that goes away through loss or through moving or whatever it is. Like, these are basic social needs that we have. And, thankfully we do have technology that can connect us. We can text, we can get on the phone, we can FaceTime, whatever. Those connections are so valuable, right? So it could be something as simple as text me something funny, or hey Siri, tell me a joke. She's got some good ones, some really corny ones too. But finding those creative ways to maintain and reach for and ask for connection. Another thing I've heard a lot, I don't know if you experience this, but people are like, well, everyone's going through it, so I don't want to reach out. I don't want to be the one that's like, well, I don't feel good today, when someone else is maybe going through something more intense or whatever. We're all sort of struggling. But it kind of comes back to that, well, we can validate each other and sort of struggle together. And there's a seesaw sort of effect around different friends. Like, some people are having an okay day and some people aren't. So I think we can kind of patch things together. I do know, right, with schools not being open, like, you're not going to meet, you're not like walking to school, oh, hey, oh, you want to get a cup of coffee? Like, those things are just gone. And we have to sort of cope with that and find ways to maintain connection. And what you're talking about is even to seek new connection, right? Which is challenging.
So how are you working currently? Are you seeing clients in person, virtually, or both, or what?
I'm only seeing people virtually right now. I actually might start seeing some people in person soon. I just got the second vaccine. If other people get vaccinated, we're having conversations around that at this point, but I'm seeing people pretty much 100% virtually right now.
And are you working in what context are you working with people? Just as therapists, as yoga, or
mostly therapy, some yoga. I do work with a group of like yoga teachers and mental health professionals. So I feel like I'm doing a lot of support around vicarious trauma and burnout and Zoom fatigue. And how do I do yoga online when I'm in this little box? And one of the things I wanted to say that I thought of earlier too, in terms of these little tools, like just text a friend and tell them to send you something funny. I've seen in my work and in myself a little more value on like very in the moment things. So less like, oh, let's develop a practice for you to do every morning. For some people, there's this need for structure, and that fits and that works because, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I have more time. I'm not commuting, so I have an extra hour before work. Okay, well, we can do what we do. This is something you do pre-pandemic too. Design a practice for you in the morning, design a practice for you in the evening, a movement, a breathing practice that might involve music or dance or lying on the floor or, using a structured yoga sequence or taking a class or whatever. I mean, there is sort of a little benefit in like the class can come to you. I've taken classes with some of my favorite teachers in this last year that I would have seen once a year otherwise. So there's that aspect of like the structured, let's build a new habit, let's build a practice. But there's also like really monitoring what we need second to second and using particularly breath, but also our choices, our actions to meet whatever that need is. So I'm thinking in particular about extending your inhale, extending your exhale. There's something, what's his name? Huberman out of Stanford. He talks about the physiological sigh, where you inhale once and you inhale again, and then you let it out through your mouth. Usually inhale twice through your nose, out through your mouth. So these are things that give us like a little reset. We do them unconsciously. You can start kind of noticing when you're using your breath, like we do it all the time. Like, okay, I'm going to finish this project. Okay, what am I going to do next? Right? So we use these little resets, but we can start to notice, oh my God, I'm flagging. Oh, I'm on Zoom and I've been staring at the screen for so long. Like, okay, like, let me just, or, I'm really losing energy. Let me sort of hold my breath in for a while. And of course, there are like medical conditions, glaucoma, or if you're really anxious, you don't want to like be retaining your breath or focusing on your inhale excessively. So there's some education around this, but we can use even like, oh, that just feels good right now. I'm going to do a little, like, shake it out and do a little breath. I'm going to run down to the corner and back. Like, rather than these big workouts, there's just like a little bite of something that's going to help me in this moment.
Yeah, I love that, kind of creating a distinction between having these planned, structured things, and then maybe using this time as a time to focus on the present and be more aware of what's happening for us in the present. You mentioned a book that you wanted to offer. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my second book is called How You Can Heal. I think it's actually, on my shelf back here, the yellow one. It's a strength-based guide for trauma recovery. And so rather than talking about this is what trauma is, these are the symptoms, and this is how it happens, why it happens, it's all ideas of like what that, I think of it like the shopping cart dance, where you're going down and you're like picking things and putting them in your cart. Oh, I don't want that one. I do want this one. And it's actually sort of structured through, in a yogic way, through the chakras and through energy centers. But it's just resources. Each chapter is a different way to resource yourself. And then there's lots of ideas of how you might do that, right? So through yoga, through breathing practices, but also through things like using our senses, using our sense of smell, all kinds of different things, using creative projects. So I think of it, and I've been sharing it a lot lately because I feel like we are in this place where maybe people even like, oh, I've got my routine down. I get up and I do this and I do that and I do that. And I still, over the course of this last year, I'm like slowly watching myself get depressed, right? Like it's not enough. So it's like, well, let's think about some of these other resources. And we do talk about social resourcing in there and social connection. I know for some folks, like that's a tricky one, because especially if we have sort of betrayal trauma and interpersonal trauma in our histories, which many of us do, like, well, how do we navigate that? How do we navigate that with this extra layer of separation? But I really want to encourage people, like it's the deprivation, and it's what we need. It's like a vitamin, right? So there's lots of ideas in the book just going through. And so I think of it as something where people can go read through it, flip through it, find an idea and just try it, right? And then add it to the bag.
Trauma survivors, therapists, anyone who's experienced trauma?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's experienced life, like anyone who's alive today at this point, I think could get something out of it. But I have had a lot of trauma therapists read it and really appreciate the reframe. And I know we've talked about this too, around really focusing on the narrative or focusing on the experience of trauma versus just like noticing what's happening right now in your emotions, your body, and finding something that helps it, right? And so, in sort of normal times that might, or even now, that might be, I need to be alone, I need to be with people. It really helps. I know people who've interrupted dissociative states with smelling garlic, right? Like you just gotta find the thing. And so it's a lot of different ideas around how can you resource yourself in the moment rather than processing. Like that's another thing, best to do with another person in general, but some of it's also private and we can do it alone or through movement. But this one's just more about how do we boost ourselves up, which I think is what we all need right now. It's just
I
been
mean,
rough.
yeah, it has been rough. And it's crazy that we're having, this discussion we're having is kind of secondary to the craziness of the pandemic, the virus, what's going on.
Yeah.
There's all these other, this mental health situation that
Mm-hmm.
people are dealing with. And it's real. It is so real.
Very real. And I would say, if I had to generalize, there's always exceptions, there's always opposites, but that it feels like what I just described, like a little losing energy, getting a little more down, a little more depressed, a little more, people kind of wanted, 2020, what a crazy year, let's put that behind us. And now, right, I still haven't seen this person, I still haven't hugged this person, or my child still hasn't hugged their grandma, or whatever. Like, those things, I think, do become more heavy over time, and the uncertainty of it we've talked about many times, right? But that's the trend I've seen the most. And it's easy to think about in normal times, like, what excites me? Well, but a lot of those things are just so off the table.
Right.
So we are increasingly being asked to sort of be creative in that, like, finding that one little thing. It doesn't have to be the whole solution. It's not going to resolve everything, but, like, what's the thing today that feels like it brings a little relief? If we can get there, like a little excitement for even like someone like you, it's like, maybe there's someone you went to elementary or middle school with that you haven't talked to forever, and they like send you a message, or right, and you go, oh my God, that really impacted me. I'm going to talk to them more. I'm going to send them something funny, right? Or whatever it is. Like, it could be a connection that's like feels really far away, that then becomes closer, right? So it's like, it doesn't have to be, I found my whole community in Bend, Oregon now. It might just be like, I sent a funny meme to that friend from high school or something, and we had a little laugh. I know I've seen for myself in the moments where I've had a deeper connection, like had a conversation with someone, I just feel, or if I've seen someone in person, oh my God, like I've woken up the next morning like, woo, like, oh my God, like I feel like I just took drugs, like, oh, this is amazing. But it is, right? And I'm not gonna purport to know all of the like endorphins, or I know serotonin is with more extreme personal interaction, but like there's something happening there, right, on a physiological level. And we can, go back to sort of the polyvagal theory and Porges's model of like just ventral vagal connection, right? Sympathetic play, something that's like different than
right. Yeah, I mean, you exude this hopefulness, and a lot of what you're talking about is like just one step, try something, see what works. It doesn't have to be this master plan of how we're going to get our lives together by 5 p.m. but what's working right now, and paying attention to what could be working right now. And again, for me, that's very hopeful, and I think I don't know, I think people are going to find a lot of possibilities in what you had to say today.
I hope so. And it is funny that it always comes back to, what about Bob? Baby steps. It always comes back to baby steps. So yeah, I do try to find funny movies too to watch, and try to.
But it's hard, like when you're in a crisis or a pandemic like we are now, it's hard to think about baby steps, like what's right in front of me. It's almost, we feel the need to figure it all out and have it all figured out, because then we'll be okay. Well, all right. So we'll have a link up for the book at the traumatherapistpodcast.com and your show notes page. And awesome, Lisa, it's great. I love having you on here, and I feel good when I talk to you. Yay. Sincerely, I do.
Likewise.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Likewise. We'll make it through somehow, some way.
All right, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Good to be here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.